you know, as an Appalachian, I'm not really a fan of the police anyways. I like to govern ourselves, and just seeing the steps that this is taking. This is reminding me a lot of where I grew up and some of the little things that I started noticing back then.
Oh yeah, like back in the 90s, under Clinton, you had the police more and more were starting to look more like the military. I think during that time, we were like Waco and Ruby Ridge and these sort of incidences were happening. And it was like the optics of watching it on TV of these like black uniformed soldiers and M16s. I think they even had tanks.
Some of them had all that ex-military stuff that they just started using.
There was like a flame tank that they used, and
I know in my hometown, one of the little local like rinky-dink police officers had this like aquatic vehicle, and we're like, we don't really have lakes. It was just they were getting lots of weird things.
Like really military specific equipment, and the uniforms went from the regular howdy doody tan and blues and stuff like that to like this like black secret police Stasi looking uniforms.
Yeah, it went from like Mayberry to G.I. Joe.
So we saw that transition really start to take place during the 90s. And I mean, there was like some precursor events like Kent State and like some small skirmishes here and there.
But yeah, in 96, Clinton started training the local police. Now this was bipartisan. It was passed by the Senate, it was passed by the House, and it was signed by Bill Clinton. And that was the first thing. I think a lot of it was dealing with the immigration that we were having, but also we were just coming out of the LA riots. And so that's why everybody was really on board with this. And then as 9/11 happened, we didn't think as much about the power that we had given that administration and then the government in general with all of that.
Yeah, and then, you just mentioned 9/11. Then we have the Patriot Act, where now you're taking these black-clad, scary-looking police forces, and you're taking the muzzle off. You're taking the leash off. You know what I mean? They have unrestricted access to all of our information now because terrorism.
I mean, remember, they sold us on the Patriot Act as it was just temporary. This was to just be for a few years so we can calm things down, so we can get the bad guys out of the country. And what is it? It's 2025, and we're still dealing with the Patriot Act today.
Yeah. And it's funny, it was wasn't that a campaign promise of Barack Obama that he was going to dismantle the Patriot Act? Because that was one of the big things between him ending the war in Iraq, because I was a soldier at the time. I really wanted that war to end. But then, like, the ending of the Patriot Act, and I think even, like, the re-election for Obama, like, he campaigned on it again.
That sounds right. I really think he did mention that he was going to not re-sign the Patriot Act during his second term, which we see how well that worked.
Didn't work at all.
Yeah.
So we go from 9/11 to Katrina, which Katrina was just an all-out chaotic crap show.
Katrina was. I mean, that was, if you want to see how the government fails at everything, just look at Katrina. I mean, not only forget about the humanitarian fail that they had, but the fact that we saw a lot of the stuff that we're talking about today. We saw the military, some bad people get involved. We saw some of the bad police get involved. We saw bad decisions made by the government that involves, gun ownership rights and freedom rights and how we are allowed to do, and giving them just a little bit too much power.
Yeah. The completely botched federal response. But the optics of it were just awful, with those like stormtrooper looking guys going door to door, and wasn't there like some kind of a gun confiscation that happened? And
a couple of the smaller towns, because there was reports of lots of rioting and lots of people with guns, there went through and did some gun conversation. They took people's guns. So
it's counterproductive too, because if you're surrounded by rioters and you're like clinging to your pillow in your house, I think the one thing that you want by your side is a gun. So especially that didn't even make sense, going around collecting guns from law-abiding citizens with registered guns.
Yeah, I had never imagined seeing that ever in my life in America, and that was just. But little did we know that was the start of the steps that they took, because next we had the stuff with the Boston bombing, and where we had police on the street shutting it down during having a curfew during the day. Now, My dad and parents said that kind of stuff maybe happened during like the race riots and such in the 60s, but I'd never seen anything like that in my lifetime, and that was shocking.
Just shutting down a whole city and going door to door, and yeah, it was a citywide manhunt that, you know, once again, it's another, you know, we're drawing you a little timeline of what we think is going on here. It's like a big picture thing. Like, incrementally, these police powers are getting more and more out of control and unrestrained.
Yeah, you give the government an inch, and they will always take a mile.
Always. Every single time. And anything the government passes that's temporary, I think we know by now, it's never temporary.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head that they've promised us was only going to be for a short period of time that they let expire and didn't renew. Maybe there's one or two things, but they're so minuscule, they're so not important.
Maybe like stop and frisk when they canceled that in New York. That was kind of a reversing of the police powers a little bit, but I think it was in the name of making things a little more chaotic. Like, that also kind of fit their goal. And speaking of that, of controlled chaos, I think a huge catalyst to what we're seeing today too is sort of the riots that we saw all over 2020.
Yeah, all that defund the police that they were talking about, and all the other chaos that was happening during that time.
Defund the police, and it was all about muzzling the police and taking away their power and shrinking back the police forces and stuff. And as a result, we've seen a massive crime spike in all of these cities that have defunded the police. But there is a very specific reason why local police specifically are being defunded. And I think it dovetails in with what we're seeing with Trump, with him federalizing the police, giving them jurisdiction and power over local police jurisdictions.
I mean, one of the things that I think is really important, and you see it in small towns, and the more you get into a small town, is knowing your local law enforcement. Because you know your local law enforcement, then you're not really afraid of them, you don't really hate them, you take away that fear, you take away that anger, that hatred. But once we start defunding the local police, and they're saying, well, just the town's still going to need police, and they start bringing in these federal police that aren't from our towns, that aren't part of our people, that aren't participating in our cultures, those people are going to be willing to do things that we might not want them to do.
Exactly. You know, I was thinking about this earlier, about the parallels with our current situation with what happened in the Soviet Union. Because in the Soviet Union, they basically followed a very similar template when they were centralizing power, where it's not that they defunded the local police in the Soviet Union. What they did is they stripped away all of their power. So the locals were not able to have any jurisdiction anymore. They still existed, it's that they fell under the NKVD and the KGB. So I think that this situation with Trump, and it's not Trump, it's not Obama, it's not one guy. This is what we're talking about. Is this is a timeline, a bipartisan timeline. And every once in a while, you might have a good cop, bad cop situation where one side pretends to be, you know, for the people, and man, police brutality, this is bad, you know. But it's meant to kind of divert you.
Definitely feeling that way, and especially since you brought up how they didn't actually get rid of the local police. They just got to the point where the local police couldn't fund themselves and couldn't function on them, couldn't do anything by themselves without the federal government. If we keep defunding the police and we keep allowing them to federalize them with, like, you know, what we're using now with ICE, we are really going, just thinking about that, we're really going the same route.
Yeah. And it's kind of odd, though. Don't you think that, like, there's an avenue for pushback? You know, I mean, we have the 10th Amendment, which separates the federal and the state powers. It seems like there's already laws on the books that should prevent the federalization of police. You know what I mean? Like, the Constitution kind of covers protecting local interests.
Unfortunately, if you pay attention, most of the administrations in my life haven't seemed to follow the Constitution that well. They pick and choose their favorite parts, and if it doesn't really fit them that well, they figure out a way to dance around it. That's kind of how it's feeling with this one too, because you're right. It starts at a particular step, and then, you know, we're not supposed to have a federalized standing army that's been able to come after us as citizens, and that's kind of what these federal police are starting to feel like. We're getting closer and closer to that.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can kind of see examples of every amendment in the Constitution being violated. So I mean, it's not uncommon for this sort of thing to happen, but yeah, it's just it's not a good thing, and I imagine there's probably a lot of people on the right, a lot of Trump supporters think this is a good thing, and we need extra law enforcement, and we need to crack some heads and enforce the law. And while, like, it's true, we need to enforce the law, what the Trump supporters are not realizing, because like we're talking about, this is one machine. There's not two sides. There isn't. So when the barrel is pointed at them one day, and it will be, and those federal police are coming after them, even though they supported the founding of the federal police, hell, they might even have a thin blue line sticker on the back of their truck. At that point, they're not going to care. You're going to get in the back of the truck and you're going to do what they say.
I mean, it's one of the things that, everybody keeps talking about the left wing, the right wing, but we're not talking about what bird it is, and it's a vulture, and it's going to pick us dry if we let it.
That's a good point. I've never heard that.
So, yeah, it's just, these are things that we have to be diligent with. Like, one of the things that me and Bryan's talked about before is I want, think about, we started off with they federalized our IDs. And that helps the federal police now because that opens up the database that they have.
I forgot about that, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of you, and if you guys don't know if you have a federal ID or not, let me tell you a little trick. Get out your driver's license, and up in the top corner, you're going to see a gold star, or some of you are going to see a black star. If you see a gold star or black star, it will say that this is a federal ID. If you don't have that, it'll clearly say on your driver's license, this is not a federal ID. And then there's a lot of restrictions that they've given us for that.
Yeah. You can't get a passport.
Can't do a lot.
Local ID.
You can't get on an airplane anymore.
Oh yeah. You can't even travel in CONUS. So.
Yeah. So man, it's just things are getting interesting. I want you guys all to just keep your eyes open. Don't be afraid, but pay attention to the world that's around you because it's gonna get interesting.
And especially because it will happen. Politics acts like a pendulum. When the left wing has power again, I want all of you people on the left right now that are staunchly against the federalizing of police to stay consistent. Stay consistent. We should all be against this.
Yes. Yeah, it doesn't matter which side. Just, this is bad.